Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 33, Wednesday, January 29th, 2020.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your co-host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney, and welcome back, listeners. Happy New Year. Happy New Decade. We're happy to be back after a nice holiday vacation.
Yes, we enjoyed that time catching up on some of our personal reading and our latest book, because today we are joined by a special guest, author of Around the Worlds in 80 Days, which chronicles his journey to 14 Disney parks around the globe. This book is a perfect blend of Disney history, travel tips, rankings, and personal experiences. We're pleased to have Dustin Engels with us today. Welcome, Dustin.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, Dustin, we're so excited to have you, and we were excited as we were just chatting to find out you're only like 2 hours away in Richmond, Virginia, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, Courtney, we wish you could be back up north with us for a little bit.
It's like a 2-hour flight, so I'll give it that, right? You get 2 hours.
It is a very painless flight.
2-hour
Yeah.
flight.
We're all 2 hours away from each other through some sort of transportation.
Exactly.
But Dustin, before we dive into your book, tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your Disney fandom.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think my story is pretty similar to most people. I actually went when I was 4, I guess, to Disney for the first time. And, I would love to say that made a lasting impact on me, but I actually don't remember a ton of it. But I went back a few years later and then just was totally obsessed and became, obsessive about planning trips and about, getting my hands on every Birnbaum, Disney park book that I could get, and any books about the parks I could get at the library or anything, and just became that was my passion in life was all things Disney, and that carried forward through my whole childhood. I think like many people who were kids obsessed with Disney, I said, I'm going to be an Imagineer. And then that never really happened. and so I just kind of kept up with, reading books and listening to podcasts as those became a thing, and visiting when I could. And that unfortunately became less and less frequent over the years for a variety of reasons. But I just kind of, I was still so in Disney every day of my life, and my brain I actually disclosed this to my wife recently, and she looked at me like I was an insane person. I was talking about going to Disney, and she said, like, do you ever think about anything else? And I said, it is literally one of the first things I think about every morning when I take our dog for a walk is, when can I go to Disney next? What could I like? It makes me happy, and I just, I enjoy it so much. And so I kind of tried to find a way to bring myself back into this world in a meaningful way. And so I ended up coming up with this idea, and kind of Disney has even more so been a very, very, very intense part of my life for the past couple of years.
Yeah, your book is so unique. I feel like other authors we've talked to, it's mostly been about like Disney history and that side of things. And while you have historical elements in your book, your experience is very unique because it's chronicling your journey. So could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to take this huge journey?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of different things. I mean, like I said, I was a little bit getting bummed out because I hadn't been to it had when I took this trip. So I started this trip in 2018, and before that, I think the last time I'd been was 2011 or 2012. It had been a while, and you start to get the Disney sadness or the Disney funk of not being there for a long time. And I was like, I need to go to Disney. And then I just kind of hit a point. I refer to it in the book as, I'm not sure if it's a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis or a third life crisis, where I was like, I need to be doing. This is a point in my life where I should be taking risks and I should be doing things that are maybe going to be less charming when I'm, 45 or 50 and, I've got a kid and I should be, being a responsible adult. And I was like, maybe this is the time where I have a little bit of flexibility to kind of do something crazy. And I mean, to your point about this being different than other Disney books, I mean, I am also I love reading Disney books. There's so much great stuff out there, which is why this is such a great idea for a podcast.
Well, thank you.
And, but, I love the history stuff so much. But I also did feel like there was kind of this little niche, and I didn't know if there would be an audience for it. But I kept telling myself I want to read a book. I kept telling people like this is when they'd ask, what is this going to be? Is it a guidebook? Is it is it a history book or whatever? And I kept saying like I want it to be a beach book. I want it to be a book that you can take to the beach and you can sit in a chair and you can read like a chapter or two and be like, that was great. That was a lot of fun. I liked those couple chapters. And you can leave it and, come back to it the next day and read a couple more chapters. And over the course of your week at the beach, you've read this book and you go like, that was a lot of fun. I want to do more fun things like that. And so that was kind of, I just started thinking, I feel like there might be an audience who would be interested in reading this because I feel like I would be interested in reading it. And so, then I just decided, I talked to my wife about it and said, is this crazy? And she said, yes. But then we agreed that it sounded interesting and I could probably figure out a way to do it. And so I decided to do it.
I love the way you describe it as a beach book. I read it on the Disney cruise, so almost there, close to the ocean.
Yes.
Also a little bit as I got back, but I really did appreciate how it was compartmentalized into the different parks because it was like, okay, I was on my lunch break. I'm like, all right, I'm going to read the Tokyo Disney Sea portion. Then that was a good stopping place when your journey there ended. I'm like, all right, I'll read Tokyo Disneyland at home before bed. So definitely an easy read, which I think our listeners and your future readers will appreciate.
Yes. Good.
I definitely appreciated. Oh, I'm sorry. I definitely appreciated your tone throughout the book. I literally was laughing in your prologue. And as you, in your first couple chapters, talking about how you plan this, about like the Wendy's cups and your sarcasm throughout, that you're right. It does feel like a beach read that I felt happy. It felt very light. I appreciated the history that you interwove, but you didn't stay on it for so long that you took away from telling us your journey at the same time. So I really enjoyed the style that you wrote this book in as well.
I appreciate that. I really, really, really appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear it. I mean, I also just knew like there's so many great Disney history books out there, right? There's so much great stuff. And it's a lot of stuff that I was leaning on, right? It was stuff that, that was definitely a huge part of this is I spent probably more time than I should have, but it was a bit of procrastination doing research about every single park. And so this was kind of calling back to my grad school days of doing research and whatever. And I would just I built this massive research document of I'd read a book and I'd say that's interesting, and compiled this giant document that I was going to pull from. But then again, I was writing it and I was going, do you really want this to be that? Do you want this to be, just kind of repeating this history that is done so well by, all these amazing Disney historians, whether professional or amateur or whatever, or do you want to do it from your own angle? And so, I felt like I needed to put some of the history to give context for people that might be less familiar with some of these parks, because I was less familiar with some of them. And so I thought it needed that to kind of guide the story and guide the journey. But yeah, I appreciate that. I just tried to make it a personal story that hopefully people would find enjoyable.
So while we're on the topic of research, you mentioned in your prologue, and you just mentioned your vast personal library of all the books that you've read of Disney history and park culture. Did you stray far from your personal collection? Did you have to do any additional research?
Well, so I work at a university, so I'm very lucky in that I have access to an awesome library where I can get interlibrary loan books and I can access a bunch of journals. And so those were really, really, really helpful in my research. And again, I think I probably overly relied on them. I mean, I was compiling all this stuff that never got. I mean, I just have this massive research document, and I mean, such a small fraction of it is actually in the book. But I mean, it was just books that, those old prints of the Walt Disney Imagineering books that are like, written by the Imagineers, but there's all these different editions of them. And I'm like, I don't have these old ones, but I could submit a request to interlibrary loan and they could get it to me the next day. So that was very nice. So I did do, a lot of that, and I'm very grateful for it, just from a fan's perspective of, I got to read a lot of cool things that I hadn't read before. But in terms of what, I tried to cite everything that I included in the back of the book, and so you can see where it all ultimately came from. But the list that actually made up my research document was a lot more extensive than that.
I'd love to know a bit about the writing process side of it. Since this is, a first-person account, how much of the writing did you do as you travel versus, okay, the trip's done, let's sit down and crank this book out?
So if I was a smart person, I would have written a lot more while I was traveling. I am not a smart person, and I am very much someone who procrastinates, I think, like many writers. And so I did write. I did have a process and I did have a system while I was traveling. And what I did is I took a journal with me. I took a hardback journal, and I carried it around with me at every park. And my kind of promise to myself was that I would do one table service, sit down meal a day. And I would just write, because I was by myself for pretty much this entire trip, except for Paris. I was solo the whole time. So, I don't mind eating by myself, but it's a little, when you're sitting there for an hour, it's a little like, what do you do other than stare at other people, or stare at your phone, which I didn't want to do. So I would break out that journal, and I would, the first thing I would do is I would write a list of every single thing I did. So just a very simple, literally just like, I came in, I went straight to Space Mountain. I wrote that thinking that when you get home, you will be able to read this and recreate your day. And I turned out to be right. I kind of could. I would read it and I would go like, oh yeah, I remember doing this. And then I would write my kind of anecdotes and my feelings and whatever, just, freehand, very sloppy, not well written at all. Just kind of, just writing whatever was coming to me, just right there on the page. And so I would do that every day. So I had those journals when I got home, and then I took those journals and I transcribed them. I typed them up in a document, not the lists of what I did, but all the stuff that I did, just as poorly written as it was written in the journal. And so that was kind of my first step. Then my second step was, I was like, I need to do more research. And so I stalled for a month or so doing more research or whatever. And then I eventually realized like, oh, you're just scared to write. You really should just start writing. So then I I had a chapter heading. I knew that I wanted to organize it by having a chapter for each park. And so I had a chapter heading for each park. I had my notes that I had transcribed from my journals. And I just kind of went from there. I just kind of worked it out bit by bit and hopped all around. But, I would just kind of scroll through and I would find something that inspired me that day. And I would say like, oh yes, that was a funny story. I can come up with something, with this. And I would just kind of flesh it out like that. And I mean, this was just an extremely iterative going through and like building and building and building until it eventually was something that was hopefully remotely readable.
So Dustin, now that we've talked about the research and how you went about writing, the final process of a book is the editing and publishing. So can you talk to us about your journey of getting this out there in the world?
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of started before I did everything. I thought I probably need to have something nailed down before I spend all this money and do all of this. And so I think like a lot of people that you all have spoken with over your episodes, I decided to reach out to Theme Park Press. So I had a bunch of Theme Park Press books on my bookshelf, and I had I had become familiar with it just over the years of collecting books and reading them. And you see the, little logo for them. And over time, it just kind of pops into your head. And so I went out to the website and saw that Bob McLean takes submissions from anybody pretty much. So I sent him after I kind of talked to my wife and said, do we think this is something that is tolerable for me to do? And she said, yes. I reached out to Bob and I basically had two things. I had a title, which I had come up with, and I had the concept basically. So I sent it to him and said, here's what I got. I've got a title and a concept. Would you be interested in publishing this? So he responded and said, I'm very interested. It sounds like an interesting project. He asked me to send him some writing samples, so I sent him, again, I had kind of, within the past few years, I had been in a graduate program, and so I had writing samples from that, and then I had published an article while I was in that program, so I sent him that article, and then he asked, do you have anything Disney related? Because that article was not Disney related. I did, so I sent him that, and he read them and said, okay, you can, put together a sentence or two. So sure, we can give this a shot. So he sent me the agreement not long after that. I think we signed that in January of 2018, I guess. And then I was, traveling as of April. I wrapped up my travel in June. And then basically I turned in my draft to him on May 1 of last year. And then ultimately it ended up coming out in October, I guess. So that was kind of that was the process from front to back pretty much. I mean, it was pretty easy. The hardest part was actually getting the book done in time, which it actually was not done in time. I think my original date was the end of January, and I got to January and said, oh, this is never going to happen. So I reached out to Bob and said, this is never going to happen. So how about May? And he said, yeah, we can do May. So yeah, that was pretty much it. So it's very cool that, if you have an idea and you have kind of, the will to sit down and get it done, and there is a way to get it done, and a way to get it out there to people.
Yeah, that's great that you were able to have it tied up from the beginning. So let's get into that actual, writing, of course, was a big part of producing the book, but without the trip, you wouldn't have anything to write about. So how did you go about planning that trip and deciding the order of those parks that you would visit?
Yeah, so that was, I think like many, I think that if you are a Disney park fan, an intense Disney park fan, you're probably a planner,
Definitely.
Right? And
you're preaching to the choir. Emily has a spreadsheet.
Yes. Exactly. That's what I was doing, is I was just setting up all my spreadsheets and running all the numbers and running all the scenarios. And there were so many things feeding into this planning model, right? It's like the cost, right? Trying to do it in the most cost-effective way. Crowd calendars actually had a pretty significant influence on me. So both crowd calendars in Florida, crowd calendars in California, crowd calendars in Tokyo, particularly, and then looking at refurbishment schedules and trying to plan around refurbishment schedules because I knew there was going to be stuff I was going to miss, but I wanted to kind of optimize the time that I would be to kind of miss the least amount of I didn't want to miss. There were just some things I really didn't want to miss, and there were obviously things that I did miss, but that is okay. And so really, it was going on to Google Flights and running a million different scenarios of how can you do this to make it make it affordable. And so that really ultimately was the biggest driver. Was I said, at one point I said, well, I could do this in 4 legs. I could go to California, I could go to Florida, and then I could do kind of an Asia loop, and then I could go to Europe. And then after not much time, I kind of realized, well, I live in Richmond. I live on the East Coast. It's going to be cheaper for me to get to Asia out of Southern California, so I may as well just do all of that together. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up kind of doing that whole trip on 3 plane tickets. I bought one from Richmond to Los Angeles, one that kind of took me my entire rest of my route except for Hong Kong to Tokyo. So I had to buy a separate ticket for that, but that was it. Bought those 3 tickets, and that got me that whole loop of going to Anaheim, to Shanghai, to Hong Kong, to Tokyo, back to Richmond. And then Florida, again, Florida was, I had been to Disneyland once, but Florida is kind of my home, right? And so that was like, well, that's an easy 2-hour flight away, right? And it definitely has the most ground to cover. So, I just went down there for a couple of weeks, and I was lucky enough that it actually was aligning with a work conference that I was already going to be down there for a few days. So that just kind of worked out. And then that left Paris. And, I had this self-imposed silly deadline of doing it in 80 days because that's what I was going to call the book. And that was kind of the gimmick. So I really just had to say, okay, well, my deadline is basically the end of June of that year. And so when can I get there before the end of June? And so just played around with some stuff to figure out what made the most sense, and got there in mid-June, and that basically took care of all of it.
Wow. That's kind of incredible, being able to do that. And you're in good company. Like Courtney said, I have a spreadsheet. I have a template that I copy over for every single trip that I've ever had. But I can't imagine what your spreadsheets look like. That's got to be pretty epic.
Yeah,
Courtney, you work with spreadsheets.
I
do. I mean, at the time, I worked at the same place, but I had a different job. But I was a research analyst that worked in spreadsheets all day long. So it's like I could sit there and I can do that in my sleep and come up with. I mean, it's fun, right? It's a lot of fun to sit there and do that, and that's obviously, I think, so much of the thrill for many of us is sitting there and imagining your perfect trip, right? That's what you're doing, right? You're mapping out your perfect trip. Like these are the amazing meals I'm going to have, and these are the amazing attractions I'm going to experience or whatever. And like that is so much of the fun of it. And so it was definitely very fun to do this, but it also was obviously a little overwhelming and daunting, and became quite a bit more daunting once I actually started doing it and realizing like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually crazy. But I survived, and it was fun. So.
A quick question. When you were picking your times to go, you said you went between April and June. I know you said the park crowd calendars was a big piece, but was also your school calendar for the times that classes were in session? You said you worked at a university. Was that a factor as well?
So it actually wasn't really, because I the positions I've had here are, I'm not a teaching faculty, and my schedule is not usually tied to the academic year, which is nice because it is definitely cheaper to to travel kind of out of the summer seasons and stuff. So I was very very lucky that I was kind of I got support to go and do this. And I mean, I have worked here for a while, and so I had I had a good amount of time built up and everything, and I was definitely very 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 strategic about when I did it to make sure that, again, it all kind of shook out and in a way that didn't kind of leave a giant hole at work or leave a giant hole at home, right? The longest I was gone was the trip to Asia, and that was a little over 2 weeks. To visit all of that stuff was a little over 2 weeks, which was, again, not too disruptive for my work or my home life, but it was probably not the most ideal way to visit all of those parks in 2 weeks, but it was an adventure that I will, always have and always be able to talk about forever. So that's cool.
I was curious because as a teacher, I am bound to the academic year.
Yeah.
And so I don't even look at crowd calendars anymore because I only have specific times of year that I have the days off to do a full trip. I'm going in April during my spring break, but unfortunately so is everyone else.
Right.
Right. But it is what it is. So I was curious how the academic calendar of your university, if that had any influence on your schedule.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately not. But, I still was, I was in Paris in June. That was mid-June. And, and actually my Florida trip was after school was out because I was there. I actually was there for the week straddling Memorial Day. And so we get out in early May. So, that and a lot of the schools in the South are already out when I was there, right? So I definitely was experiencing a little bit of the summer, but summers are actually not as bad in Florida anymore for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, we lucked out in Paris. I kind of didn't know what to expect in Paris because there's not as much in terms of crowd calendars and stuff. I felt like it was probably not going to be too bad because the prices at Disneyland Paris seemed pretty reasonable, and they also were offering a free half board plan for any package that you booked. And so I was like, I have a feeling this isn't going to be too crazy. And luckily it wasn't. The day that we left was the crowds were definitely starting to swell. But yeah, we were there near the end of June, I think. So that would be doable on most school calendars.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's great that you had that flexibility. I kind of wish I had more of that.
I understand.
So one of the things I liked that was kind of an observation point throughout your book was you were trying to observe what American culture, how that translated to these international parks. So I'm going to ask you to kind of take a big feat here and think about your entire journey. What is something that surprised you about taking something very American and bringing it internationally?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, and I honestly, that's the one thing is I wish I had more insightful things, and I kind of reference it in the book is that I'm kind of limited by my own. I have to admit that I'm limited by my own kind of cultural perspective and stuff, right? But take for instance Shanghai. I had obviously been watching the development of Shanghai China or Shanghai Disneyland, and so much of kind of the press for that was, what did Bob Iger always say? Was authentically or what did he say?
Basically, authentically distinctly Chinese.
Yeah, something like that. It was some version of that. And so I expected to be kind of, wow, this is going to be so different from the American parks. And I mean, I guess it was in some ways, but I also was just kind of, I got there and I was like, this feels like Disneyland. This feels like a very American experience. I'm just watching, people buying foot-long hot dogs and doing all these things that I associate with Main Street USA, even though they don't have a Main Street USA, they have a different version of it. But just going through it and doing all of those things, I'm not sure what I expected, but it really was just interesting to see kind of the way it just kind of took something that has become such a quintessential kind of part of the American experience and the American childhood, and just kind of plopped it in the middle of Shanghai. And there's so many people there that are just really loving this experience and having such authentic and similar reactions to these rides and these experiences that we would have, at any of the American parks. It was interesting to see that. And, I kind of say in the book, it just kind of drove home to me that, like, there's all this wonderful diversity and different cultures around the world that have, all these amazing and unique perspectives. But at the end of the day, like, we all just kind of want to have a fun day with our family and, experience this amazing thing with our kids or with our parents or with whatever. And Disney is the best at that, right? The best at creating these experiences that are so tailored and perfectly designed to make you feel joy and to make you. And so, it was a very cool experience to see, like, this is just a human experience, right? This is just a thing of being amazed and impressed by what they're able to pull off.
I love that sense of connection so much, but then also appreciated hearing your insights and observations as you were in those international parks. So I'm curious, culturally, what is something that you think the parks here in the States could borrow from those international parks?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I go. This is going to be like a shallower answer than I think you're probably looking for, but really it is something that has stuck with me for whatever reason. Is when I was in Tokyo, I was amazed at. I wrote extensively about it again. Like, they deal with a lot of crowds, right? They deal with a lot of people go to those parks, just huge swells of crowds. It is amazing how polite and how organized and how just respectful everybody is of everybody else in a way that is so refreshing and amazing. And that's not to say that you can't experience that in the American parks or whatever. But, I kind of reference it like I arrived at the parks and kind of the turnstiles had these perfect single file lines in front of all of them, which made it so much more, something that can be very anxiety inducing getting into the park. And especially for someone who wants to have like the perfect day and wants to see all the things they want to see or whatever, it just was like, oh, wow, this is nice. And then, I went to the parades. And when I got to the parade route, everyone was sitting on the ground all on the parade route. And I joined, everybody there sat down. And when the parade started, I, kind of start going to get up like I would do at an American park, and nobody's moving. And I'm like, what is going on? And I realized that no one stands during the parades. Everyone just sits and watches. And it was like, this is brilliant. Why are we not doing this? Everybody can see, like, the little kids can see, the parents can see, and I was like, we didn't have to get here 90 minutes early to see the parade. Everybody could see the parade. You just, you just sit down here. And so I was so like amazed by little things like that and was thinking, we should all just come to an agreement that this is a better way to do the parks as a collective is, just kind of, it's okay. You don't have to be in the front. You don't have to be the first. You just all kind of do it together and enjoy it together, experience together.
Honestly, that's where my mind went to for this question, because Emily and I are also short. We're 5'2" or under. And when you described, like, sitting a few rows back, you're like, oh no, everybody's going to stand up and now I won't be able to see. But like, nope, if we all just sit down everyone can see, and I'm there for that. I'm with you. Let's bring it.
Same.
It was
I have this.
wonderful.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just saying it was wonderful. It was the exact same way with Phantasmic there and everything. I mean, which obviously Phantasmic's a little different, but their Phantasmic does not have a state. Well, I guess in Disneyland it's a little similar, but in Disney World, obviously, you've got the amphitheater there, but there, it's just in the I forget, the Mediterranean harbor at Disney Sea. And so like, you're just standing around Mediterranean harbor. And I thought the exact same thing of like, I am never going to be able to see this because I did not get there early enough. And I was thinking, well, I'm one person. I'll be able to find a spot. It's like, I didn't get here early enough. And then sure enough, everybody stayed seated the whole time and I could see the whole thing.
I seriously have this theory in Magic Kingdom that anyone in the hub, if everyone just sat and then the people on Main Street can stand,
yeah,
it would just work.
It would work.
Seriously work.
It would definitely work.
As former cast members, Courtney and I have both worked in operations in Magic Kingdom. I'm sure it's a safety issue maybe of having everyone sit. I don't know. I guess I don't think it would be as big of an issue, but I'm assuming that's why Disney, because every time more people are sitting, other than like on the curb, you always see a cast member tell people to stand up. And I don't know if that's a safety thing or you're right, or maybe it's a cultural thing. That's just what we've always done. So we assume. I don't know. It's interesting.
I also think there has to be some, right, there has to be some, again, there has to be like kind of a cultural agreement that this is what we do. Because like you said, there's just so much traffic at Magic Kingdom, right? Like if you are watching Happily Ever After, there are hundreds of people moving through at the same time, right? They're trying to cut through the hub, or they're trying, and they do an amazing job of routing the traffic, kind of to minimize the chaos of all of that. But I could see where that would be problematic. But again, there just didn't seem to be that kind of, there wasn't an urgency to be somewhere else it was just like, we're all here and we're enjoying this thing and let's just enjoy it together. And I really, really loved that.
Same along the lines with the sitting. Did people also pull out their cell phones to record everything that you ended up watching through people's cell phones?
So it was a mix, right? It was definitely a mix. So in Japan, I definitely did not see that. I mean, really on most of the now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of a uniquely American thing. I want to say that in Paris we saw it a little bit, but it definitely was. I mean, it definitely is most prominent at the American parks of having to watch all the people in front of you on Pirates recording their terrible video that will never be able to be watched or enjoyed ever again. But yeah, I mean, it definitely was a thing in particularly again in the Tokyo parks, that everyone just seemed so engaged in a way that was, again, refreshing and it really made you made me, at least, it made me get, because I'm someone who's easily distracted by my phone, right? I might not be recording it, but I'm easily distracted by, I feel a buzz in my pocket and I go, I can't wait the 3 minutes to not check this. I need to, slide it out and see what I got here. And I did quickly kind of realize, I mean, I remember thinking that in Tokyo, thinking like, oh, wait a minute, you are going to be an outlier here if you start doing this, and you're going to feel bad about yourself. And then it does not take long for that to kind of fade away and to go like, oh my gosh, I forgot what this is like to just enjoy something and sit and be in the moment. And so it's definitely something I hope I can remember and keep doing on my trips.
Awesome. So since your trips, since publishing this book, what has life been like for you? How's the Disney fan world reacted? Your colleagues at work, your family?
I mean, it's been great. I've gotten some really, really nice feedback from people. I am not one to go out and shout it from the rooftops that this is out there or anything. I mean, I've done a little shameless self-promotion on social media and stuff, but so every once in a while I'll just have a very nice person that I know come up to me and say, "Hey, I saw that you published a book and I read it and I liked it," and that makes me feel good and it's great. But it's nice it's nice to contribute something to this community and to like I said, I really appreciate hearing you all's feedback and hearing what you thought and hearing that the year of work or whatever was not a total waste of time. So that's nice, but it's been great, and I'm trying to kind of figure out what I want to do next. I had a baby back in July, and so that is kind of like, thank you very much. That's a bit of a life reset, and so that I spend a lot of my time doing baby things. But one of these days, he's going to be a little more grown up, and we're going to have a little more flexibility again. We're going to have a little more time to think of kind of aspirational things that we want to do and experiences that we want to have. And I've already said, like, my checklist is to get him to all the parks in his lifetime and take him all over. And who knows what that will become, or if it will become anything, or if we'll do it or what. But it's been a really cool experience, and I'm happy that it's out there in the world and that people are seeming to enjoy it. And I hope that it encourages people to do it themselves, because I think that was my big takeaway, is that, like, I think it's more attainable than a lot of people think. I obviously was very lucky for a variety of reasons of, like you said, the schedule and having the flexibility to do it. And of course, not everybody has to do it in 2 months or whatever. I probably wouldn't even recommend that you do it in 2 months, but it's I know it's a dream of a lot of people to go to these parks, and it's an awesome thing to do, and to experience these different cultures, and to go to these amazing cities where these parks are built, and to visit them and to meet the people and to talk to them and to do whatever. So it's just a cool thing that I encourage everyone to kind of to dream about and see if they can figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, I imagine a trip and this whole journey has changed your perspective a lot. How has it changed you as a Disney fan?
Oh boy. I like to think that maybe it's made me, I can get like Disney fans that are very, very into all things Disney. Like, it's easy to get down about stuff and to say, like, oh my gosh, there's so many changes and I don't like these changes. And I think it's easy to kind of get cynical about a lot of it. And so now that I've done this and I've experienced it and I've seen kind of the highs and the lows of all these parks and what they can be, and I just kind of try to take a more optimistic view of, like, there's just, these are such incredible experiences, and we should enjoy them for what they are. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have fun, interesting conversations about what they could be or whatever. But, I try to be just a little more appreciative of what kind of joy these bring me in my life. And yeah.
Like you said, through your research, like, just admiring the level of detail, getting a chance to kind of sit back, and like you just said, put the phone away for another 10 minutes and see what else can you look at that's around you.
And that's absolutely true. Like, appreciating, all the amazing people, that not just Imagineers that come up with these amazing ideas, but all the frontline cast members who, that was another kind of universal thing for the most part, is, like, cast members are wonderful everywhere, right? They're like, they're there to make this a fun and enjoyable and amazing experience. And, maybe sometimes they'd be a little grumpy, but you know what? They're people too, and they have a life, and you never know what their day is like that day. But for the most part, they're all just so awesome, and it just was, again, it's kind of awe-inspiring to go to these places and be like, this is such a cool experience, and I'm so lucky to be able to experience all of it.
So have you downloaded Disney Plus? Are you a Disney Plus watcher?
I am a Disney Plus watcher. Yes, I got that 3-year membership that I think a lot of us got.
A lot of us got. That too. So I'm curious if you've watched the Imagineering story, which with your love of Disney parks, I'm assuming you have.
I did. I would watch it the day they would drop every time.
So I'm curious about your perspective of that documentary, considering that does span all of the parks, and you have been to all of the parks.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was like it was like revisiting all these places, right? And for the most part, it was stuff that I had seen in my research, right? Like, they covered so much stuff in those 6 episodes, but there's also only so much they can cover, right? So I had wasn't a ton that I was watching and going, oh my gosh, I've never heard this or never seen this before. But I just got so excited seeing all this. I mean, watching the old footage of them building Hong Kong or building any of these things and just going like, I was there and I remember that. And I have a very fond firsthand recollection of this stuff. And so it was really, really fun to see it from that perspective. And then again, just to kind of gain a further appreciation of even if I knew kind of the facts that were kind of conveyed throughout the whole series, still hearing from all the Imagineers and stuff and hearing them talk about it gave a perspective that I definitely found both fascinating and very, very exciting to hear about. So I loved it. I really, really, really hope that they do more series. I saw people on Twitter and stuff saying like, what should they do next? And I think there's so many amazing ideas, like doing a deep dive of each park or doing a deep dive of rides or doing a deep dive with an Imagineer and their career or whatever. I really think there is just so much potential there, and I really hope that they do that.
I love all of those ideas. I'm sure a series that, in depth probably inspired a lot of people as well. Do you have any advice for aspiring Disney authors?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my biggest thing is just to do it and to believe that you can do it, because I think you can. I mean, I'm not the most, I think it comes across in the book. I'm not the most like, rah, I can write any day and this is going to be great and everybody's going to love it. I mean, I definitely am someone who's constantly racked with self-doubt and, trying to figure out, is anybody going to like this or do whatever. And ultimately, like, that's so much of the getting it done is just kind of getting past that. I actually listened to another writing podcast or a kind of interview podcast called The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, and it's a screenwriting podcast. So he interviews screenwriters, and he's always asked this question. He asks kind of a standard set of questions to the screenwriters he talks to, and one of them is, do you get writer's block, and what do you do to kind of push past it? And I've always found that to be a really fascinating question, because the responses range from like these super idiosyncratic, like weird things that people do to get past these very specific things that you're like, okay, that's not something that I would ever do or be able to do. But one answer that always kind of fascinated me before I had really written anything was, there's more than a few people who say, like, I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe that's a thing. And they say, I really, and I always kind of didn't like that answer whenever I heard it. I was like, that seems like a very kind of, I don't know the right word, but it seems like a very just kind of, I'm such a great writer, I never get writer's block. But as I kind of tried to start this project and kind of get it off the ground, I started realizing that I think I kind of buy that. I think that really what writer's block is being afraid to write, right? It's being afraid of being judged for what you write and for writing something and feeling stupid about it. Like, I think it's very rare that like you're sitting and you have nothing in your brain. You have nothing kind of that you're thinking about or that you want to say. Like, usually you have something there. It's just a matter of getting it on the page. And so that is really what I had to tell myself throughout this whole process is like, this is a cool thing. And you've already gotten further than a lot of people just by saying you're going to do this. And so I think that's the first step, is kind of coming up with an idea and saying, I'm going to do this. And then the second step is just pushing past that self-doubt and saying, like, what I write doesn't have to be what I write right now in this moment doesn't have to be good. And it doesn't have to be profound, doesn't have to be funny, doesn't have to be particularly well written. Like, I will deal with it, and I don't have to give this to anybody if it isn't good. And so I think that's a lot of it, is just kind of getting up the courage to say, like, I can allow myself to read my stuff from the night before and go, whew, this is rough. And be okay with that, and just, be okay with, that's okay. You can delete it and it's okay. And so that's kind of my big piece of advice is, find your idea, find your kind of voice and what you think you can kind of bring to this community, and then just do it, and you will write something awesome. Like it's very doable.
I really like that advice. That's the first I think we've really talked about writer's block that way on this show. And we've asked a lot of authors their advice. Courtney and I, at some point, we've been getting all of this advice. We're going to have to write at some point.
We'll get there.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely a big hump. And I mean, it's a thing that I still am dealing with, right? Like, I will never be able to read this book ever again in my life, because I know that I will read it and go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I wrote that. Or like, I can't believe I didn't edit that or remove that sentence or whatever. And that's just me. That's just who I am. But you just have to be okay with it, and you just have to take the good and hope that it finds an audience of people that like it and enjoy it. And even if only a few people find it and enjoy it, that's okay. That's awesome. That's still cool.
Well, we definitely enjoyed your book. But the last question we always ask when we interview authors is, what is your favorite Disney book?
Yeah, so I feel like this choice might be controversial, but I just can't say anything else. I, for a very long time, have been obsessed with James Stewart's Disney War, which obviously is not the most, it's not the most flattering book. It's not the most, again, it's very controversial in terms of, I think there's been questions over some of the accuracy of some of the stuff, although, I don't know what is right or not. But it is such a fascinating book for someone who grew up in the era of Eisner Disney. And obviously, if you're a Parks fan, I mean, that era of Disney is there were some really profound changes to the parks, right? I mean, like, the amount of growth that happened over that period is staggering. And I don't think the parks would be anywhere close to what they are today without that period in time. And so for someone who's obsessed with the parks, who's obsessed with kind of Hollywood and the studio system and something, I mean, it's hard to not love a giant book that goes into all of that and is written by a Pulitzer Prize winning, journalist. So it's a very fascinating book to me. And so that's a book that I really can't get enough of. And I actually used it quite a bit. But I also just really love all of kind of those Imagineering kind of books. So, I'm an unapologetic fan of Animal Kingdom. I love Animal Kingdom. I think Animal Kingdom's amazing. So a book like The Making of Animal Kingdom, which kind of really dives into everything that the Imagineers did, and so many different kind of details about the building of that park and the design of it and the actual construction of it. I obviously I love stuff like that as well. So those are really my wheelhouse. I mean, I love the history books and everything as well, but I love those kind of books that show how all the nuts and bolts of this were put together and the thought process behind all of it. So I just really love that kind of stuff.
You are not the first to mention Disney World, nor shall you be the last. It's certainly come up a few times. I don't know that Emily and I will ever cover it on here. I think we'd both like to read it personally, but it's very controversial.
Yes. I mean, it's definitely, I totally understand why some people wouldn't like it, but it's hard to not. I mean, it was interesting for me to see the Imagineering story kind of grapple with some of that stuff, right? Like it didn't just say like, we built California Adventure and it was the best park ever, right? Like they kind of grapple with some of that. And so Disney War is if it is anything, it is thorough. And so seeing all the kind of things that were going on behind the scenes that maybe, would have contributed to any shortcomings that may have happened in that park. It's just a really, really interesting book. So I highly recommend it for everyone, and just, understand that you can still love Disney and still love everything about it, even if it is not all rosy in that book.
I think if we ever do, we have to read it in tandem with like Michael Eisner's biography and kind of juxtapose them against each other. That would be fun.
Absolutely. That's a fascinating book too. So and you are totally right. It is a fascinating book to read, kind of in conjunction and with the storytelling of both of them. It's really, really interesting.
Well, quite a few things for the Michael Eisner era will be coming up on our next topic. So in February, we will have another author interview with Christopher E. Smith and his book, The Walt Disney World That Never Was, Stories Behind the Amazing Imagineering Dreams That Never Came True. And here's the description from Amazon. On an alternate Earth, Walt Disney World guests are taking in the thrills of Thunder Mesa, braving the Beastly Kingdom, marveling at Villain's Mountain, and staying in the night at the Disney's Persian Resort. Want to join them? This is your guidebook to the theme park that Disney never built. So, Justin, you gave us a guide to all of the Disney parks around the world. Now we're getting a little into what could have been.
So I have that book on my bookshelf. Very much enjoy it. I actually believe that is the first theme park press book I ever bought, was that book. So that is awesome.
Yay! Well, we're glad that you've enjoyed it. A good testament for our listeners as well. In the meantime, if they want to keep up with us, they can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse, or email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. You can follow me, Courtney, on Instagram at Great Guthsby, or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at Emily_McD. Dustin, where can we keep up with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm like kind of active sometimes, but I'm out there. So my Twitter is at Dusty Engels, Engels.
Awesome. And Dustin, we always close out our episodes with a quote, which I'm sure you're aware of from hearing some of our episodes. And we love to turn it over to our authors whenever they're on our show. So do you have a quote for us?
I do. So I actually was going through another book on my shelf, The Imagineering Way, which is a book of basically a collection of tidbits and anecdotes and things from Imagineers that they kind of shared kind of about the process of creativity. And I really kind of was struck by this. So it's from Jason Sorrell, who's, I believe, a former Disney Imagineer, but he has this section called Procrastination, the Writer's Curse. And it's a little bit long, and it's got a quote within the quote, but I really think it kind of sums up my experience and my kind of helpful guidance to anyone who's interested in writing a Disney book. So his quote is, Walt always said, quote, "The way to get started is to stop talking and start doing," end quote. That's true in our work, and it's true in life. Stop talking about all your dreams and do something. Get something on paper, get started. You might not get it right, but at least you'll have it in writing.
Oh, I really like that. And we're so glad that you took your dream, wrote about it, and were kind enough to share it with us and our listeners today. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, we'll see you next time.
Bye. The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.